Hey guys, my name is David DuPree. I'm on the sales team here at Mercado. During this webinar, make sure to type all your questions or any comments below so that we can take a look at those live. Today, I'm here with our resident compliance expert, Rebecca Rizzuti. Rebecca leads our product team here at Mercado. How are you doing today, Rebecca?
I'm doing well, David.
That's
Thank
great.
you for having me here.
Absolutely. So, Rebecca, can you give us a little insight to your background in supply chain?
Absolutely. I've actually been in the industry for 20 plus years. I've only worked on the import side with various retailers, and during that time frame, one of the greater achievements that I had was to get my customs broker's license in the process.
So, what is involved with getting your customs broker's license?
So there's a lot of reasons why people will actually go and get their customs broker's license. The primary is obviously being able to facilitate the import and export of goods into the United States. There are other reasons, like professionals like myself who actually do get their broker's license really just to get a better understanding of the import and export processes so that we can actually facilitate the efforts of our companies to ensure we're complying with regulations. The license itself you can achieve by taking an exam. The exam is really quite difficult. It's a 4-hour exam that's offered only twice a year. You have to achieve a passing grade of 75%, which seems like it could be easy, but the ranges of passing is anywhere between 3 and 7%, which has actually been compared to the bar exam as actually being harder to pass the broker's exam in some cases. To achieve it, it's hours of studying. You're looking through the regulatory books for imports. You are having to understand classification of goods. And then you're going to have to basically look at whatever is part of any regulatory requirement. And you don't know what the questions are in advance. The only assistance you have is you can refer to past exams. The exams have changed over time. I have had my broker's license for many years. At the time, it was taken in person and you took the exam at a location and it was proctored. Since customs has actually changed a little bit of the process and now you can actually take the exams electronically, but it's still the same premise. There's still a significant amount of effort that goes into the preparation of even passing that exam. Again, it's definitely something that you work towards as a professional, and you can continue to take that test several times and still maybe not achieve, the passing grade, but it is definitely an accomplishment that I'm really proud of in my career.
So it feels like when it comes to compliance, there's a lot of different facets that are involved with this world. What are you seeing as the most pressing challenges for Mercado customers in the compliance space right now?
100%, David. There's definitely a lot of different areas that you can be focused on in the compliance space, but right now what we're hearing the most from our customers is we're hearing social, we're hearing regulatory, and then we're hearing supply chain compliance.
Why do you think Mercado customers are focusing on those three specifically?
Well, the first one being regulatory, those are really kind of dictated or mandated by laws and regulations as the name implies. So those are always going to be a constant. So it's never going to take a backseat to anything else that a company is looking at, because as regulations change or new laws are implemented, they're going to have to be responses to make sure that you stay in compliance. So social is very much tied to the regulatory aspect as well. Something to the extent that a company is not going to want to produce goods unethically using either child or forced labor. Those areas are going to be driven by laws and regulations, but of course they're also representing reputational risk. So companies aren't going to want to risk that because consumers do not necessarily forgive or forget those things very easily. And the last one, again, being supply chain. Those can be tied to also regulatory requirements, either around security, the movements of goods, the introduction of foreign matter into your shipments. But it also really looks at how a company wants their products to flow in their supply chain. So anything that could prohibit them from getting their goods from point A to point B in a timely manner to meet their needs for coming to market, that would be a concern. So that's why we hear a lot about supply chain compliance as well, to keep everything moving as expected.
So you have a pretty extensive background. So what would you say are the things that companies should really be considering when it comes to compliance?
For every company, it's going to be different. They should really be looking at their processes. What is involved in their supply chain? What is the biggest area of risk for them? Are they dealing in locations that they can't oversee very well, which means they would want to have maybe in-country representation or support? Are they importing very little in terms of, high-risk products? What kind of testing would they need done for their products? There could be so many different varieties of combinations of how you want to develop your compliance program. What we usually hear or we recommend to our customers is to make sure they understand their programs and not to overcompensate in areas that are considered low risk for them, but maybe because they're hearing a lot about it in the industry. They really have to make sure that they're targeting their supply chain, their risk, and then dealing with that and making a scalable solution.
So what are companies doing now to manage their compliance challenges?
So what we're finding now is companies have actually taken some time in recent years to really map out their supply chain and their compliance risks. So they've created processes, they've created flows, and now they're taking those diagrams and they're trying to actually implement controls. And they're creating gates, and they're saying, if we can comply with these requirements, then we can move forward in the supply chain. Now what they're doing is they're trying to take one step further from that. They don't want to necessarily just have an exchange of emails and paperwork. They're looking for solutions to help speed up this process now. And that's where we really see the demand picking up from our customers.
So during the first webinar in this series, we spoke with Rob Garrison, the CEO here at Mercado, about the 10 points of automation that we provide to the import process. How can we apply those same 10 points of automation to the compliance space?
So there's a few areas that we can actually work in Mercado to help manage compliance for our customers. The first one really being the order. That's really going to set the foundation for any program. That's where you are actually entering into a contractual agreement. And sometimes people forget that the order is really what you're asking for, and the expectation is that it's going to be delivered as you requested it. In Mercado, the order is going to offer all of the key points, like what it is you're ordering, what is the price of that, how many of those things, and who are all the parties that are associated with that transaction. Obviously, there is a significant amount of items that we could detail on the order, but being able to get that order structured in such a way that it's not going to be changed, or it's not going to be changed in another location that all the parties aren't aware of it, that's really what Mercado is trying to do, is stabilize that communication. And if there are going to be changes, we have features within our platform that allow you to change them in a controlled environment, rather than going outside of the platform and then maybe not having the opportunity to capture those changes. So we offer a changelog feature. Changelog is going to allow you to engage with all the parties on your order to make adjustments, make recommendations to how we can complete the order to your satisfaction. And once that's done, all the parties who are on the changelog actually get to make an agreement. And when that agreement is done, it's actually recorded in the system. Previously, or more commonly, you'll see people recording changelogs in all kinds of areas. It can be done on email, it can be done on Excel. In some cases, they're done during conversation. You're having calls with your suppliers overseas, you're having chat messages with them, but you're not necessarily recording that. It happens to live within maybe those two parties' communication tools, but they don't get back to the organization, and it has to get back to the order because we're going to use that information for everything else. Another feature that we actually offer on the order that is something a little bit newer to our customers is our production monitoring. These are really sequences or gates, the one we talked about earlier, that we can develop for our customers. So if a customer is looking to measure certain portions of their supply chain, so an order has been issued, have you actually received that order and viewed it? Have you accepted that order? What is the expectation of actually starting the production on your order, and so on. We have the ability to give our customers complete freedom over what that looks like. So if those are important areas for them to measure and track to make sure that everything is moving according to plan, then that's great. If they want to make any adjustments, they don't really need any type of development or request to do so. That power is really put back into the customer's hands. They can develop multiple sequences in our product, and then they can assign those sequences to different types of orders. Because that's another thing that we see a lot of, is that customers are engaging with multiple consignees. They're delivering to multiple entities, and those entities could have different requirements. So a order for this product in particular could be requiring 10 steps of validation, but another product may only require 5. You don't necessarily want to take extra time to do an extra 5 steps where it's not necessary, but you want to make sure you capture each one of them wherever it is. So production monitoring is something that is being well received, and we're really seeing a lot of traction on that feature. So with everything that we talked about in terms of managing the order, change log, production monitoring, what that's enabling us to do for our customers is to basically take the information that's being housed within Mercado, those data elements, and actually use those in the next steps of the process. Where we were having blind spots before on changes to those orders or changes to prices, having that all solidified in the platform allows us then to leverage all those data elements for multiple options. We can help generate documentation for our customers to enable their booking process. We can use those documents to create invoicing. We can also use that data and not necessarily just create the documents, but use that data to send it to their other providers. And then those providers can facilitate their processes like booking. Instead of having somebody send a completely separate message to their booking agent or to their freight forwarder, we can actually integrate with those partners and send the information directly to their system, which is going to actually lessen the burden of keystrokes and definitely eliminates any errors that could be made by transferring information. The whole point behind Mercado is to keep all of the information digitized and keep it structured. We want to eliminate anybody else coming into this process and denigrating that information. The better we do that, the more effective we're going to communicate all of that down the line and enable us to do other solutions further into the process. So just kind of continuing with that train of thought, those documents that we're going to generate with all the information that we've collected from the order, from the booking, and from any of the details that the supplier is able to provide us, we're going to use, again, that information to move it through the customs clearance process. It is already pretty effective for us to take those data elements and create another integration with a customs broker, and that's going to allow that entity to take that and then submit that declaration to U.S. Customs and to any other government agencies, and then clear the goods. Again, if we can provide that electronically, we're actually reducing the time that it takes for them to prepare those entries and file them. And the key here is making sure that all of this information is filed in advance of arrival. Because we were talking about supply chain being so important, well, we want to make sure that there isn't any slowdowns. The faster we can get the information to all of these different parties that are helping you monitor your supply chain, the faster they can review that information and make sure that they can ask any questions to make sure that everything is clean and clear by the time those goods are actually either on the water or in transit or have even arrived into the port. So those are really key areas of improving the speed to market. And then on the other side is that we're finding that as we become more sophisticated in how we transfer this information between those parties, it allows our customers to work with those other service providers to kind of build better programs, spending less time on having email communication and more time on how to improve upon their program, because they're not focused on just pushing that paper or data around. We're really looking at advancing what we're providing them and saying, this is how do we get to the next level. So once we've actually taken that journey that we've been talking about, and we actually have all this data, we're actually able to enable some verification of payments. There's a couple different payments that occur in the supply chain. Just to kind of highlight a few, one of them could be to obviously the US Customs for tariffs or duties. And today that's a huge topic in terms of having just your regular duty, but you also have your extended duty. We've got 301 tariffs. We are continuing to see additional anti-dumping cases, which are going to require a whole nother set of payments to be made. So having the accurate information pass through so that you can make those declarations and pay it effectively is super important. If we don't actually do that and our importer isn't on time, they can actually lose their ability to send that information either electronically and could actually be forced to handle it manually. And that is definitely not something that we want to see. So Mercado enables us to kind of keep that information flow happening. But because we have that information in the system, it also allows us to send that information to our customer system. So returning some of this data to their ERP allows them to leverage this information to do validation on other payments that have to be made. There is going to have to be a payment of goods. So in order for them to pay the goods, they have to have an understanding of what they ordered and what they shipped. And then obviously you want to make sure that you declare those same figures to the government. And if you haven't, you want to be able to clearly understand why there's a variance. And if there is an explanation for that, that's fine. But this allows you to spend time reviewing the exceptions as opposed to reviewing every single file or entry that's passing through your supply chain. So that facilitates the finance team's effort to make sure that everything that's being reported is accurate. So then as we actually push those last pieces of information back to our importer, the last thing is really the receiving of goods, right? So everything that we've done now has been based on the pushing of information from beginning to the end, but then you actually get the physical receipt of the goods. Now, if everything has followed the process, then your receipts should go seamlessly. But what we can do is quickly identify if there's a variance. So if your container arrives and you unload those products and you didn't receive 100% of what you were ordered, you can quickly identify what needs to be adjusted. Did you make a different declaration at any point in the process? Meaning, like, did you pay the vendor differently if you paid in advance? Did you declare to US Customs anything different than what you received, and does that need to be adjusted? Or do you have to make an adjustment maybe on your counts? So those type of things allow our customers, again, managing exceptions. Our customers do not want to have to manage 100% of this process. They would much prefer to look at where the variances are and manage that, because it's a much more effective use of their time. So when you have all of those items together and all of that data held within Mercado, then it's going to allow us to create a very, very powerful analytical tool. Okay, so whether they leverage Mercado's analytics platform to provide information either on all of the items that I discussed, we can also take data from other service providers or other partners as well, and then we can combine those and return those analytics back to our customers so that they can actually evaluate their supply chain. Analytics is so powerful in terms of how do you improve upon your lead times? How do you reduce your time to market? Where do you have issues in terms of, like we talked about, production monitoring? Are you making decisions and writing your orders effectively? Could you be setting yourself up to not hit milestones? And the analytics are really going to show where you've got that fallout. And that's why those are powerful. Using those then to make better decisions the next time around, that's really where the power is. And then once you have enough of that, being able to use our software to actually predict where you're going to have a problem. So knowing that maybe your orders weren't written with enough lead time, we can help you identify those gaps and say, these orders traditionally have been written with a 30 to a 45-day lead time, but our history shows that you needed 60 to 75 days. And that's going to help you make adjustments to how you order, how you market, how you sell, and how you position those products. So all of those things together are enabled by technology. And that kind of brings us back to the beginning. What are our customers looking for? They're looking for a better way. They're looking for a way to really digitize and have better visibility and work less on a transaction and really work more on a program.
Well, thank you very much for spending some time with us today, Rebecca.
I've really enjoyed discussing our products with you, and I hope it was helpful.
Well, I think what we've learned is that the world of compliance is a huge space, and it's clearly important that companies have a lot of things that they have to stay on top of, and it's a complicated and complex procedure. So I really appreciate the light that you shed onto that within other organizations. So to the audience, if we didn't have a chance to address your comments or your questions today, you can get in touch with us at support@mercadolabs.com. Rebecca, again, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.